Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to Couch Conversations with the Doctors, where health is wealth. What night is it tonight? It is Monday night, and it's time for Couch Conversations with the Doctors. We're going to go around and introduce our esteemed panel as always. And you know what, Dr. Hampton? I'm going to start with you. That's our Wolfgang Puck of Nutrition. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Congressman. Excited to be here the day after a weekend of gathering with family. I was privileged to go to Mississippi and spend some time with my wife's in-laws. I mean, my in-laws, should I say, and had a good time. We were in Utica, and and of course, that's not far from Jackson, not far from Port Gibson. Those are the two towns other than Jackson where my wife's from. So I really had a good time. It's nice to get around folks and just pause, celebrate life beyond work, and I just hope everybody had a good time. For me, I'm a family and obesity doctor on the south side of Chicago. I work for Advocate Health, so I'm in this large health system, but I feel that every person in front of me is important, and I try to meet everybody where they are and address their needs. So I'm happy to be here, answer questions, and to enjoy a good conversation. So, Dr. Maya, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey everybody, I'm Dr. Maya, always keeping it 100. I am part of a group called the Onyx Health Collective. It is a Black-owned medical service. We are in South Shore, yay. We are in Austin, yay. And as of last week, we offer sexual wellness support at no cost in 25 states. So we are growing, and I'm excited. And even though we're in 25 states, I'm glad to be here in Chicago on the South Side, learning and working with all my colleagues. So excited to do this. Thank you, Nikki, and thank you, Congressman, for building this platform and keeping it going.
100%. We'll transition to Dr. Graham. Let's let the crowd know who you are.
Thank you, Dr. Hampton. I'm a retired physician. I worked in the western suburbs for about 30 years. Following retirement, I went to work with a congressman in his office in Washington, D.C. It really opened my eyes to public health and public service. It's a real honor to be here with my colleagues, and we're going to do our best to answer your questions.
Thanks, Doc. Appreciate you. And let's transition to Joe Harrington.
Yeah, I've had a very interesting and diverse career. I actually majored in education. I did some work in schools. I wound up getting a job with the health department, but didn't know I was working. City Health Department didn't know I was working for it because was working out of a Board of Health clinic, and I thought I worked for the Board of Health. And I was very young, but I've had a tremendous career. I've worked at 3 hospitals and worked for the city and the state health department. I retired in 2017. From the Illinois Department of Public Health, where I was the regional health officer and an administrative law judge, which was very interesting.
Nice.
I got stories.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. We'll introduce our leader here, Dr. I'm gonna call him Dr. Danny Davis because he's on the panel.
PhD.
Yeah, his whole life he has an honorary doctorate just because of all the service that he's given to the community. So, Congressman Davis, introduce yourself.
Well, let me thank all of us. I've had a very interesting weekend, but a very interesting today, as a matter of fact. I started my day with the Black elected officials, West Side Black elected officials, and practically all of them were present. I think there may have been just one or two. And so anytime you get about 15, 16 Black elected officials together for a discussion, that's always a good thing. And we listened to candidates who are running for president of the Chicago school system. which is a great big corporation, a great big entity, a great big number of employees, a great big budget, a great big deficit, a great big, a lot of things. And it was very interesting. But I also spent time with the ambassador from Pakistan today and with their minister for economic development and my colleague, Representative Jonathan Jackson from the 1st Congressional District, and Dr. Butts from Access Healthcare, who is also Pakistani. And we ended up having a well-rounded discussion about a lot of things. But I also visited with my heart doctor today at the University of Illinois, Medicine. And she indicated that I was doing okay from her perspective, other than getting control, total control, or better control, I'll put it that way, of my blood pressure. And I seem to be having some, it was all right, off the chart or nothing. But she did indicate, and I don't mind. So, I'm very interested in this business of how do diabetics really control or get the control of their blood pressure that they need to have. I mean, it concerns me a great deal, and it's something that I think about because I would like to live as long as I can. There are so many things that need to be done, so many things that need to be worked on. And so I always was told that charity begins at home and spreads abroad. I'm trying to figure out, how do I get better control of my blood pressure? And so I hope that becomes a part of what we discuss this evening. Thank you very much.
Yeah, they say charity starts at home, and one thing I do at Advocate with my teammates is I always let them know we value you, and you can't expect them to give good patient service if they're not being valued and respected. So if I have a teammate in front of me, I consider Congressman Davis part of the team. Obviously, we need to make sure his needs are being met. So, and as his needs are being met, it'll allow us to meet the needs of those who are on the call. We want to do a shout out real quick to V Tally, saying good evening to all, and of course Connie Taylor saying good evening to everybody. So I'll just say what's on my mind as it relates to that topic. I think about this topic often because many people are not fully aware that one of the problems with diabetes is that the connecting your sugar to your arteries will ultimately irritate them. And some people who have arthritis know that when they eat sugary foods, they will notice that sometimes, just like with the weather change, they'll notice their arthritis will flare up. And that's all when doctors talk about inflammation being the source of a lot of disease, that's kind of what they're speaking to. So if you have sugar sticking to your arterial walls, those arterial walls will be upset about it, and they may not open up and dilate. They may not have the elasticity of a normal artery. Like a sponge, an arterial wall should open up and close and open up with ease in a healthy person. But when those arteries are constantly being bombarded with glycation or sticking of glucose to the cells, which is what happens when you're supposed to have a teaspoon of sugar circulating in your blood as we speak. But if I eat foods that have a lot of sugar in it, then you'll have more than a teaspoon of sugar. I had a patient today who consumes soda regularly, and they had soda with them during the visit today, and it was 38 carbs on the bottle. It was just a little 8-ounce bottle of soda. Probably was a Pepsi, if I recall. And I said, if you do the math, and this is just an estimate, we say you say 38 divided by 4, that's about 9.5 teaspoons of sugar. So in a body that's only supposed to have 1 teaspoon of sugar, now you've put 9. So if you have 9 teaspoons of sugar floating around in your blood because your body doesn't have the capacity to manage it because you're insulin resistant, meaning your insulin's not able to get that sugar into cells quickly, that's going to be the process of glycation. Now, this is a person who's been doing this for years. And what's the big deal, doc? It's just a soda. What's the big deal? But what they don't understand is that over years, you're going to cause a lot of irritation to those arteries. And they may not hurt you in the beginning because your arteries the human body is very resilient. But eventually what happens is the pancreas, which is under your left rib, will stop being able to manage all of that sugar because it manages it by producing insulin. And its job is the insulin is like, helping that sugar to get into your cells. But over time, it's too much work. It's the people that worked overtime over the holidays because their colleagues were off. And by the time they got to Monday, they're just so tired. And they can handle that year 1, year 2, year 3. But once they get to year 15, 20, and beyond, those are the same people who are just barely able to come to work themselves because they're so tired. So your pancreas gets tired. And now all of that 9 teaspoons of sugar from soda, as an example, there's many examples. There's not enough insulin to help remove it. So now the sugar floating around to damage your blood vessels becomes more prominent. And eventually those blood vessels that are so irritated, they get stiff. And the things that used to occur, the endothelial cells in those blood vessels previously were able to make nitric oxide. Many of us know that's what opens up your arteries when you're having chest pain. Some people take nitroglycerin, and some people take medicines regularly to prevent angina, which is when you're having that tight sensation, but it's not quite a heart attack. So now you're not opening the arteries because the nitroglycerin is a dilator opening up, and now you're constricted. So diabetes, based on what I'm saying already, is leading to constricted arteries. But there's other things that's happening because when you have a high sugar, you also have a high insulin trying to compensate until the pancreas gets tired. And what they find is that when the insulin is high, it makes you retain salt. So now you have another problem because wherever salt goes, water goes. So you have extra water going into your blood vessels. Oh, by the way, when your insulin is high because of the sugar, it causes you to have inflammation. And now that inflammation compounds the irritation, leading to less nitroglycerin, etc. So you have all of these things happening chronically over time. And that then leads to the high blood pressure Congressman was worried about. And the high blood pressure chronically will then lead to a higher risk for cardiovascular disease. Now, you're already talking about vascular, but if you put cardio in the word, you start to understand if I'm pumping my heart through a stiff blood vessel, then my risk for things like congestive heart failure is higher. So you have ankles that are now swelling. And it just kind of goes beyond the heart because there's blood vessels that the blood sugar is affecting that are all over the body. And again, I always remind people, why do you want to put type 2 diabetes into remission? Because you got blood vessels in your eyes. And I've said this on the program before. And again, the number one cause of blindness is diabetes because you have blood vessels in the eyes. The number one cause of dialysis is diabetes because you have blood vessels in the kidneys. The number one cause of amputations is diabetes because you have blood vessels in the legs and in the arteries in the legs. And of course, your risk for, this is what's crazy, going back to hypertension and cardiovascular disease. And all my colleagues know this. If you have a situation where your diabetes is not controlled, your risk for a heart attack is equal to a person who's already had a heart attack. I'm going to say it one more time. Uncontrolled diabetes has the equivalent risk of a heart attack compared to a person who's already had a heart attack, which clearly is a person who's at higher risk. So my goal as a doctor is not to manage diabetes. And the standard of care in this country is to have an A1C of 7, which sounds pretty good when your neighbor has an A1C, which is the 3-month test of 12, 13 or higher. So it sounds really good to have an A1C of 7. Why would I want it to go to 5.6 or lower? Because the A1C of 7 is still a blood sugar of 150 on average. But a normal fasting blood sugar should be between 70 and 100. So you're saying it's okay to be 50 points over normal because you have this diagnosis. So we're going to treat you differently than a normal person. So my whole point is this. The concern that Congressman has about the blood sugar then causing or being related to hypertension is so much bigger than just that. And that's why this country has to change its concern from managing with medicines, restricting salt, to why in the heck are my blood vessels stiff in the first place? Once you focus on that, reducing inflammation, get enough sleep, exercise, reducing the foods that cause spikes in your blood sugar, then the nitroglycerin will start to be made in your arteries again. You can heal. Then you will stop holding on to all the salt, and all of that extra water following the salt will not happen. Then you won't have the inflammation. But we live in a world where we give you a statin for the inflammation, nitroglycerin for that, the nitroglycerin issue. We give you water pills to reduce the salt. So we have to change our approach. So your short answer to your question, Congressman, is understand why am I inflamed? It's mostly diet. And how do I reduce that inflammation? It's mostly diet. And then you work on sleep, stress, and movement, because you know what? You didn't tell me you were bringing your cousins to the party, Nikki. Beautiful creature.
Yeah, I want to jump in when we get a chance.
Yeah, I'm done. I'll stop there because I said a lot, but I just want people, root cause. It's okay to use the Band-Aids temporarily. And that includes, that's the Band-Aids are medicines and supplements. Berberine is great, but it doesn't address the root cause. And until we learn that and teach our clinicians that and teach our patients that and the health systems and the country, we will continue to make the companies who make medicines rich when we should be trying to, and I hate to be political, but we have to stop this nonsense. But we don't want to demonize the companies because my wife is on insulin. She's type 1. She cannot live without insulin. So I don't want to demonize drug companies, but we have to teach the the clinicians to not rely on all these medicines, because we can't afford to have everybody on a GLP-1.
That's right.
Ridiculous when we could just change the diet. I'm done. That's my sermon.
Okay. Let the church say amen.
Amen.
Yeah, I'm going to try to be brief, and I'm going to cite three things that occurred to me when I was listening and give a very specific example. It's all about what you eat, how much you eat, and how much you move. Those are the three things that contribute to what we're talking about in terms of what they call in public health premature death. That means that some people die before they should have died. And there were things that they could do to probably prevent that death from happening. So what I want to talk about and what I know a lot about is blood pressure. And the example that I'll use, because everybody probably remembers the first African-American mayor of the city of Chicago, Harold Washington. Harold Washington weighed about 200 pounds, somewhere between 190, 200 pounds when he became mayor. When he died, he weighed 284 pounds. He gained 180 pounds while he was in office. And he would smoke on occasion. So those are risk factors related to increased blood pressure, increased blood sugar, and whatever you want to talk about. Those are risk factors we all know. So for me, it really gets back to what you eat, how much you eat, and how much you move. And so you have some degree of control over those three things. You can eat anything in moderation, but you can't eat everything all the time and expect to be okay. And it's also interesting that we live in an age now where more meals are eaten away from home than at home. So most people, if you're not preparing the food, you really don't know what you're eating. And you really don't know how it was prepared. And you may not know based upon how often you eat and how regularly you eat and where you eat and how you eat in between meals, that you may be consuming a lot more food than you actually need. So there are some things, some steps that you could take that are very simple. And I'll go back to say, what you eat, how much you eat, and how much you move plays a significant role in your life and potentially your life expectancy.
Mhm. So I just want to ask Dr. Tony, Dr. Maya, another question. It's been a long time since I managed blood pressure, but aren't there some medications that are thought to be advantageous for diabetes because they protect the kidneys? And there may be some blood pressure medications you may not be able to use because you have diabetes. So I wonder if the two of you could share with the audience some information about that.
Want to tackle that, Doc?
Yeah.
I think Maya's muted. Maya, are you muted?
Yeah, she's muted. She's muted.
Yeah, you're muted, Maya. Dr. 100.
All right, cool. So
Yeah, I think she's having some difficulty.
yeah, having some technical. So yeah, one thing that we'll see oftentimes in our clinical practice is there's, you don't even have to have, a diagnosis of high blood pressure to take medicines we call ACE inhibitors and angiotensin receptor blockers, right? So the question is, why is that true? And it's very simple. When you think about diabetes causing blood vessel damage, I mentioned earlier that the blood vessels in the body are what's being damaged, right? So what you're trying to do is provide some protection for those blood vessels in the kidneys, because we know that most of the people who end up on dialysis, let's just say you have 100 people, the I'd say 80 out of 100 people will end up with um, who have dialysis as their diagnosis. 80 out of 100 have that diagnosis because of diabetes. Now, of course, the second leading cause of kidney failure is uncontrolled blood pressure. So those are the two culprits, right? So the ACE inhibitors, medicines that in Pril, for example, lisinopril, enalapril, captopril, they work specifically in the kidney filters. Your kidneys have filters, and what that does is it lowers the blood pressure in those filters. And so anybody, the American Diabetes Association, knowing that these drugs work at the level of the kidneys, feel that the ACE inhibitors and the angiotensin receptor blockers, also called CARBs, should be pretty much given to people with kidney disease. Who have diabetes, who are at risk for kidney disease. And that's just the standard of care, because you want to reduce the pressure directly in the area of the body that's at high risk. I'm not saying that everybody has to be on the ACE inhibitor. It's not like everybody, but it is kind of standard of care to at least consider that. And then you may ask, well, what do they monitor to determine if my kidneys are okay? And you may notice if you have diabetes that we always ask for a urine test. So there's a urine test called a microalbumin test, and that urine test is measuring microscopic albumin. What the heck is albumin? Albumin is like protein, and protein is like muscle. One of the things your body does not want to do is lose muscle, because you need muscle to just walk around and to thrive. So we measure that. And what's cool about this microalbumin, unlike the other test that's in your blood called the creatinine, this test is more like the canary in the coal mine, in that all of us who have been to the coal mine, like Dr. Mason talks about, urinary health and things like that, and he talks about the blood vessels in the prostate being kind of warning signs, right? There's issues. So this is a warning sign before the creatinine or kidney test in the blood becomes abnormal, that there's Houston, we have a problem. So if you have a microalbumin over 30, it'll suggest that the kidneys are starting to lose protein, which also then suggests that you're at risk for kidney failure. And then you start to really notice the creatinine, and you hope that you have time. So the logical answer is, well, how do you reverse that? How do you stop letting the kidneys get bad? So if a doctor says, well, we're just going to try to manage that, you need to be logical in this conversation. So the first question is, going back to what I said earlier, why do I have issues with my body losing protein? Why is my kidney getting weak, right? And then you start to think like a logical person said, oh, it must be the diabetes is not well controlled. It must be my diet. So I've seen people have microalbumin as high as 2,000 or 3,000 and goes back to normal with diet change. It doesn't make sense that would happen because you don't hear about it, but it makes a ton of sense if you remove the thing that led to it in the first place. And most bodies are very resilient. So again, if we think about the question was, why do we take these medicines, ACE inhibitors, ARBs? Is to help the blood vessels in the kidney thrive, but they're the Band-Aid. Let's go back to that concept. So I can take these medicines all day, but do you think if I keep eating the foods that raise my sugar chronically over years and I never get rid of that, do you think the medicines are going to keep you from going on dialysis? And the answer is, it's just going to take longer to go on dialysis, but you will end up on dialysis. So don't focus. So it's good to have this conversation because we need to know how to protect the kidneys while we adopt the lifestyle that'll save our kid, prevent this. But so it makes sense, but you also don't, because you want to have control of your blood pressure, and you want to have, you want to reduce the microalbumin. But what you don't want to do is use that as a crutch and to say, I'm good now. Because if you take that approach, instead of taking 10 years for your kidneys to fail, maybe instead of taking a few years, it may take longer. So instead of like maybe 5 years, maybe it'll take 10 years. But ultimately, your goal is to never have that happen.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, we hear you.
I'm gonna stay off mute because I think when I try to, okay, sorry about that. So yes, everything. Tell me again.
I'll come back. I was going to talk about another blood test. But
Okay. You want to go ahead?
I'll try to be quick, and that's the GFR. Because a good friend of mine who's a nephrologist, he's a kidney specialist. He always talked about looking at a patient's GFR as an indication of the possibility that your kidneys will fail. But the point I want to make before I get in that, I'm going to try to be brief, that if you don't get enough blood to the brain, you have a stroke. If the heart itself doesn't get enough blood, you have a heart attack. And if the kidneys don't get an adequate supply of blood, they shut down. So we're talking about what they call end organ disease. So that happens with a lot of organs in the body. And I just took a look at my hand, because you can look at your hand and to some degree see a map of the blood vessels, because those lines in your hands are showing how the blood is moving and where it's going. And every area of your body, the tissues in your body, need a fresh supply of blood regularly. And that's what the heart is pumping out, fresh blood, and the arteries are carrying that blood throughout the body, and the veins are bringing that blood back to the heart so the heart can get a fresh supply of oxygen and start that process all over again. So I want to talk about the GFR. It's called the glomerular filtration rate. And it measures really how well your kidneys actually filter. And that's what the kidneys do. They filter waste and excess fluid from your bodies. And a GFR should be 90 or higher. Anything less than that, and again, it's a simple blood test. So that's something else. If your doctor performs a GFR, then you need to know, and if you get a copy of the lab report, it'll tell you whether it's normal. If it's 90 or above, it's normal. If it's less than 90, there are ranges. And the longer it stays like that, that means the more likelihood is that you will have to go on dialysis. I was talking to, and this was a dramatic statement I heard made. I was talking to a colleague of mine who was actually over the Gift of Hope, the organ donor program. And I have a cousin that's on dialysis. And I asked him, I said, well, my cousin is on dialysis. Is he on the list? And his answer was striking. Everybody on dialysis is on the list. That's a long list, right? That's why there are only so many kidneys. Everybody that's moving toward kidney failure, the doctors put them on the list. Because if it doesn't change, eventually it'll get worse and they will move up on the list. That's how the list works. And I didn't understand that till he said it. Everybody, and you see the dialysis, everybody is technically on the list because that's what's keeping them alive right now. They can't stop the dialysis. As long as they do that, the kidneys, because the dialysis is doing the work of the kidneys, because kidneys don't work anymore. So you want to avoid that at all costs. And I want Dr. Maya to speak because we'll be coming out of time. And I know she has something powerful to say.
I was just going to answer Dr. Graham asked about medicines you should and should not. I think you mentioned ACEs and ARBs, Dr. Tony, and then those are shoulds or currently recommended. currently not recommended is the calcium channel. I'm sorry, the beta blockers, unless you have a heart condition associated with it. So if someone is living with diabetes and they have high blood pressure, I don't just jump to a beta blocker unless they have a heart condition that's also going on with that. And the reason behind that is the beta blockers mask the signs of high and low blood sugar. Beta blockers control the rate of boom, 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 boom. And sometimes when my heart needs to be like, okay, something's going on, sugar's too high or glucose is too high, glucose is too low, that jittery nervous feeling you get, you're not going to get a lot of times when you're in a beta blocker. In fact, they use beta blockers to suppress that. Okay. Then there's one more I'm missing. I should have been thinking. Thiazides. Thiazides are no longer the top recommendation for someone with diabetes because they can cause a process that actually increases your glucose. So yes, our ACEs and ARBs, no, or pause to thiazides and pause unless heart condition is in place to metoprolols and all the OLols. So that's that. The other thing I want to bring up, I did put it in the chat, and I want to, it could, maybe it's me. I also want to bring up 30 to 80%, I believe, of whether or not someone is living with diabetes and has high blood pressure and all that business is genetic. Genetics play a role in that. Now, why is it 30 to 80? Is because I believe a large part of that is zip code based. They say it's genetic, but it's also where you live, where your parents, and rather than tease that out, I think they just said it's genetic. But there are some genetic genetic conditions that can be inherited that kind of lead or put you at in a place where nutrition, activity, and intake you have to optimize it sooner in life rather than later in life, and the gravity of how you can benefit from it changes. And public health are things like what's around you, what is your access to foods, what is your access to be able to exercise, what is your access, down to how many trees or how much greenery is around you to help reduce your stress. And that's public health. And then speaking of public health, I believe, could be wrong, the doctorate was earned in public health by Congressman Davis. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. So the doctorate, I know you got some honoraries.
77.
Nice.
Yes, I know you got some honoraries, but I do think it's important to note that the doctorate was earned. It's funny when I was going to say you certified, but it felt so off to say that to the Congressman. So, and how do I say it? You're certified. That's
earned and well deserved. Absolutely. Well, Nellie Purnell King is here with us, and she says good evening. Bonnie Schmitley is here, and she says hello to everyone just as well. Audrey J. Cox is here, and she says good evening, everyone. Sandell Scott is here. Hey, Sandell, how you doing? She says hello. Laura Leone is here. Hey, Laura, how are you? Laura, I'm calling you tomorrow. How you doing? Also, she says healthcare has a different GFR rate for African Americans. They recently corrected it.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Laura, for sharing that information with us. I want to say hey to Beauty, who is here. Hey, Beauty, how you doing? Thank you for being here with us. Jack Olaf is here, and he says hi. And Tony, yes, my cousins, those are really my children. They having a hard time today. I just got dogs jumping across my lap, so I don't know what to do. I was trying to, play it off like it wasn't really happening.
You should have just let them be part of. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, Platinum is in love with Maya, so he really wanted to be seen, and he too big, so I don't understand why he was jumping. Absolutely. Want to say hey to the Core Center. I see you on Instagram sending me that shout out, telling me that you're here. So hey, Core Center, I'm not going to forget you. To the guys in the garage, hey guys, we are here just as well. One gentleman has a question from Instagram, and he says, is it possible if you are a diabetic to have dark chocolate instead of milk chocolate? Can that be healthy? I know he pushed it. I know he pushed it.
How much chocolate does he intend to eat? That's
Right.
probably the operative question. I know he
Yeah.
likes chocolate, but if you eat too much chocolate, that matter won't help you.
That's right. I think your meter is the final decision maker. Yes, it's true that many of my patients who can tolerate a slightly bitter chocolate, which is the dark chocolate, can get away with the dark chocolate because it doesn't have as much of the sugar in it. And cocoa, the major ingredient of chocolate, is actually considered a great anti-nutrient and can be perceived as healthy. So I would judge it more based on how much you're consuming, as Joe has suggested, and also how your body responds to it. And if you're able to take some dark chocolate, let's just say you're at 65% and you're like, uh-oh, I'm still spiking. Well, maybe go to 75%. And if you're still spiking, it's a little tougher to tolerate, go up a little higher. And some of my patients will they'll have the chocolate, but they'll also maybe have a little whipped cream or something to add or take the bitterness off. Just like people put whipped cream in their coffee, you can kind of do a little whipped cream with it to help off. So, but I find that people enjoy that. There's a recipe people can search. It's if you search Diet Doctor chocolate cake, right? And you'll see a recipe for a chocolate cake. Now, chocolate cake that's in the image when you search that will look like a very thick chocolate cake that sounds like a problem for a diabetic, but it's not, because the typical cake would have 50 or 60 carbohydrates. And again, you divide the 60 by 4, and that's 15 teaspoons of sugar. But you'll notice when you go to Diet Doctor chocolate cake, it'll actually say 8 carbs for a slice of cake. And you're like, well, how is that possible? And what we do in my home is we turn those cake slices into cupcakes, which is even smaller. So I estimate it's only 5 carbs per cupcake. The ingredients that make it work include what you just mentioned, which is dark chocolate, butter, eggs, and vanilla flavor. And when you combine those things, magic happens. And what's cool about it is that you make that little cupcake that's only about 5 carbs. You put whipped cream on that. And some people may do berries. And all of a sudden, you have this low carb snack that'll take that chocolate edge off. But it'll also, because of how you mix those things together, it'll also take the bitterness away from the dark chocolate that you use to make it. So don't use milk chocolate. Use dark chocolate. So in the world of diabetes, there are so many alternatives to traditional recipes that you can use. And just as a commercial, I'm on the board of the American Diabetes Society, and the American Diabetes Society is not the same as the association. And if you go to that website, AmericanDiabetesSociety.org, we have meal plans and recipes, all with the ideal of foods that are low glycemic. And guess what? If you're plant-based, they have a low glycemic or a low-carb vegetarian. If you're Mediterranean, you got a low-carb Mediterranean. So you can use almost any dietary pattern to create meal plans that will then honor your taste buds in a way that may surprise you. We may make a pizza with the crust made of chicken or cauliflower. Exactly. So, and you're like, well, that's not going to taste good. I have news.
It's delicious.
It's delicious. And you put cheese on anything, it's probably going to taste good. So
no to the cheese. No to the cheese.
Oh, girl, please. There's something wrong with you if you don't like cheese, but we'll let you slide.
No to the cheese. Dorothy Murphy is here and she says hello to everybody. Of course, Laura sent her email at Sinai. Thank you, Laura, so much. West Garfield Park is here and they says, keep up the great work, Congressman Davis and Nikki. Health is wealth from Reverend Walter Jones. So thank you, Reverend Jones, for sharing that. There is off Instagram, we have it's the Ukrainian Village, and they said thank you for all the great work because health is wealth. So thank you guys so much for watching and listening. Well, there's another question off Instagram that says, if you dilute your Pepsi in water, does that help? Well, we pulling teeth right here. So does
Dr.
it help?
Mason said, ain't nothing water but water.
Okay.
And I think that goes with what Missing Harrington was saying. If you take a 12-ounce Pepsi and you half it with water, but then you drink 24 ounces, you still drink the same amount of sugar as if you would have drank the Pepsi in the first place. So,
Well, I don't know. Anything that you can pour on your battery or cable to kind of loosen the corrosion and get that off. I wonder about putting it in my stomach.
Right.
That's as far as I'm going with that.
Yeah.
What'd you say, Dr. Hampton?
Some people use electrolyte powders. So rather it's Crystal Light, or if you take a non-sugar electrolyte powder and put it into sparkling water. They sell sparkling water everywhere. It used to be Perrier. Now there's all these different companies. You'll get electrolytes, which some people need anyway, and then you won't add the sugar, but it still tastes like soda. So you have to be creative, but you want to use the diets and the zeros to start weaning away from the traditional sodas, and then you can move towards electrolyte powders with no sugar in it, of course. Those are things that will allow you to still have the taste of soda without the sugar of soda. But diluting it is not very effective. And who wants to drink soda that's been diluted anyway? Now, because do you want a zero soda or do you want a watered down soda? If you had a choice, you'd probably still go with the zero or the diet because it'll still taste a little bit better.
Well, thank you so very much for sharing. So I don't know if you should dilute that soda. Stephanie says, thank you guys so much, but I'm with Dr. Mason. He says diets do just that. He says diets do just that. It's a diet. I'm for the livage. You are right, Dr. Hampton. Let's change our lifestyles. Let's not call them diets. Just change your lifestyle. Thank you so very much. Also, we have an additional question that says, I'm moving away from tons of carbs and I'm trying to eat healthier by eating more fruits, but my sugar tends to stay up still. Why is that? Well, if you're eating a lot of grapes are little shards of sugar. That's all I'm going to say, but go right ahead.
Yeah, it's Maya, you want to say something? I mean, this is, nature's candy is what we call fruit. So you live in a world where we are been told our whole lives, eat more fruits and vegetables, which sounds logical, but there's levels to that statement. And, would I eat a vegetable that's very high in sugar? So if I eat a vegetable that's very starchy, that may not still serve me, even though it's a vegetable. I always use the example of quinoa. So it's in the plant family, but that can still raise your blood sugar. The same is true. A lot of people do bananas because they're looking for potassium. Potassium is actually good for your blood pressure, but a medium banana is 28 carbs divided by 4 is 7 teaspoons of sugar, and a large banana is about 35 carbs. We'll call it 32, and that's 8 teaspoons of sugar. So if you're not sure if you're going to respond negatively to that much sugar, just check your sugar about an hour or two later, and you'll see a spike. So I know it's confusing when you have some people saying eat fruit, and then you have other people saying don't eat fruit. I'm in that camp. I'm not saying never eat fruit at all. I'm just saying that the berries probably won't spike you as much. A green apple probably won't spike you as much. An avocado probably won't spike you much, but there are certain fruit that will. So let your body be the final decision maker. Check your blood sugar after you eat fruit. And if you can find fruit like kiwi that spike you as much, then you can have that periodically. But what you need to be a thriving person with diabetes who puts it in remission is to focus on animal protein and non-starchy vegetables. I actually recently, I'm gonna do a little commercial again. Sorry about that. Congressman, don't kick me off the panel. But I recently, I actually wrote a book in 2017 called Fix Your Diet, Fix Your Diabetes, right? So if you go to Amazon, you'll see it. Just type Dr. Tony Hampton. But I actually changed the cover. And so I have a second edition of that book. I'm going to remove the first edition. I've already requested that because the cover of the first edition has too many grains and things like that. I changed it. I think my image of my cover now has salmon, some leafy greens, some slices of avocado, and some berries. So the goal of the book and the goal of anybody who's trying to put this into remission is to understand which foods have high sugar content, avoid those foods, and eat the foods that don't. So that's the most important thing you can do, because so let's just say if a person has issues with meat, right? But if you think about it, the hour after you eat a steak or chicken or fish or turkey, you're not going to have a spike. So if there's an issue there, it's probably downstream and less important than the most important issue, which is that high sugar, because the high sugar is more likely to put you in harm's way than any other concern you may have about a food like meat or chicken or fish. And then you want to focus on non-starchy vegetables to go with that animal protein. That approach is the approach. If you don't even buy the book, just eat animal protein and non-starchy vegetables, and you'll have the book summed in one sentence. and it's the book just provides tools and a way of thinking about it. So I just want to really be clear. Anybody on this call who's concerned about diabetes, particularly type 2, which is the kind you can reverse, ask your doctor to do a test called a C-peptide, C-peptide, and ask them to do islet cell antibodies. Those two tests will define with clarity whether or not you are still making insulin. And if you're still making insulin, you can reverse or put into remission type 2 diabetes. It's just that simple. If you're not making insulin, like my wife, you have to take insulin. But 90+% of the people who are hearing this message have reversible diabetes, but you can't reverse it if you don't know which foods spike your sugar. And that's what these resources are for. They're here to give you guidance. And if you don't need a resource, just Google the food that's in front of you and say, okay, I'm eating green beans today. Green beans, carbs. And when you Google that, it'll say 7. Then you go to the next vegetable. Ooh, my aunt made this broccoli carbs. It'll say 10. Those are low numbers. But if you Google rice, white or brown carbs, it'll say 45 per serving. If you Google a large spaghetti, if it's pasta, and by the way, spaghetti, which is delicious, it's just flour. So flour, a tablespoon of flour is equivalent to half a tablespoon of sugar. So if I eat spaghetti or mac and cheese or any other pasta, it's going to be on average 40 carbs. Divided by 4 is 10 teaspoons of sugar. So I'm going to say this last thing. I know I talk a lot, Nikki. You shouldn't have had me on the panel. I'm sorry, Congressman, but I got to say this. I'm at the family reunion. My wife is sitting there because she lives with me and she's a prisoner. She's a prisoner. She's sitting there with ribs, chicken, and and then she had green beans, right? The green beans are 7 carbs, and the meat has 0 carbs. And they had barbecue sauce on some of the barbecue. She didn't eat that. Now watch this. Let's add it up, and that's the last thing I'm gonna say. So the person sitting to the right of me also had diabetes, one of the uncles. He had a soda. We looked at the soda. It had 38 carbs. Number 2, he had bread. We estimated the muffin was 20 carbs. He also had baked beans. we looked it up while we were at the table. It had 40 carbs. He had I think it was mac and cheese. Here's another 40 carbs. He had the barbecue meat with the sauce. Now, if you look up Sweet Baby Ray, shout out to Sweet Baby Ray, one of our favorites, right? Amen. If I meet him, I'm going to shake his hand and say, "What you doing to us, brother?" For every tablespoon of Sweet Baby Ray, you're going to get 18 carbs. We estimated he had at least 2 tablespoons. That's 36. I'm just going to stop there. I'm adding this up right now, and we have 6. Okay, that's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 174 carbs. Now, let's divide that by 4. How many teaspoons of sugar is that? Did he know that he was eating 174 carbs? No, this is a traditional holiday meal. My wife had 7. He had 174. So that's the world we live in. And what I'm trying to convey, if people know these things, then they will change their diet. Maybe. We need coaching. Don't shake your head, Joe. We need coaching, support, and prayer. But what you'll find is they'll be okay. They'll be okay because they'll find that, oh my God, if I'm sitting there with some greens and some string beans and all the animal protein I want to eat, shout out to Dr. Mason. What's going to happen is you're going to be fine. And you would have sufficiently dined. And when you're in that hot heat, what's going to taste better, soda or water in that hot heat? And that water was sitting in all that ice, and that's all you really. So what I'm saying is my job on the planet is to teach this so at least people have a choice. And then they'll use their meter and their continuous glucose meter to then provide the evidence of what they're doing being the right thing to do. So I rest my case. And I deal with this every single, I don't go to these things preaching to people. They come to me and they ask questions. Doctor, I just got diagnosed. What do you think about what I should be eating? And I just answer. I never go to these events, preaching, because that's not what we're there for. So there's hope, Nikki, because there's a path. Is it hard? Absolutely. But it's harder to be sick.
Absolutely. And Congressman, you started something because we cannot keep up with the questions. We have 98 questions.
No way.
And then we have people calling my phone to ask questions. And it's because I'm not reading their questions, so they're calling. We're going to ask these last 2 questions. These 2, because they've been here a while and they kind of came in first. But we have, for the other 97 people who actually sent the question, we're going, I'm going to send these questions out and we're going to see if we can get some of them answered for you, even if we just put them in the chat. And then maybe we can pick some of this up next week. So Lacey Harris says, thank you. Working on changing my diet. So thank you so much, Lacey. Thank you so very much. Deborah Crable has a statement. She said, well, my question was, should I stop putting macaroni in my tuna salad? You've answered it. And thank you. Just plain tuna salad will be less on the carbs than my tuna mac. I got you, Deborah. I got you. West Garfield Park says, should we eat seafood? That's going to be our last question of the evening. Absolutely. Should we eat seafood?
Absolutely. Why? Because now as a carnivore, I like steak. So I eat a lot of red meat and I thrive eating that way. It's fatty and it has a nice fat and protein balance that I need to thrive. Seafood has omega-3s and they're DHA and EPA. So for me, I don't eat enough seafood to get my omega-3s, which are also good, Congressman, for those blood vessels, because they help that oil makes them more elastic and it reduces inflammation. So you want to look at your situation. If I'm eating salmon once a week, I'm probably getting enough omega-3. But If I'm not, then I need to supplement with a high quality, high potency omega-3 supplement. So that's kind of where I'm at with the supplementation. And I do believe that seafood, if you're pescatarian, where all you eat is seafood and vegetables, I think that's a great diet as well. My goal on this platform is to remove the fear of red meat and saturated fat and all of those things, because the evidence is uh, not as strong as people think that these things are harmful. The thing that you should worry about the most are things that spike your sugar. And if you start there, then you can kind of move towards, if you think leaner is better, that's okay. But I just think that the sugar and fat, the sugar and the starch are the enemies for most people.
Gotcha. Well, Congressman, that was Wilbur Cook on the line, and he says you would want me to answer his question.
Ah,
Ask his question. And Congressman, I told Wilbur we couldn't take it because we're running out of time. But if he texts it to us, we will definitely try to get it answered.
absolutely.
So thank you, Wilbur, for watching. And if you text me your question, I'll make sure that I'll put it up so they'll answer your question. On to our Until Next Monday's. Got a really quick announcement. Just want to remind you guys, August 15th is right around the corner, and that is our back to school picnic, parade, and World Health Day. Don't want you guys to forget it. Come out, get your immunizations, your physicals, your book bags, everything to get started for school. So please don't miss that. We're right in Columbus Park. Everything is open and free to the public, so join us on Saturday, August 15th. Please remember to get in your applications if you would like to be in the parade or at the health fair. Thank you so very much with that. Well, Tony, Dr. Hampton, that is our guru, our Wolfgang Puck of healthcare. What is your Until Next Monday?
Well, I think I'm going to, again, circle back to resources. And again, I think the people feel hopeless because they don't have resources. So although one of my resources I mentioned tonight is my book, let me see if I can show this. So this is the new cover of my book. And you see that salmon and that avocado and the things I mentioned, right? So get the second edition, because there was a few things in the book, the previous book, that had grains and stuff that I had to tweak a little bit. So as I've evolved, I've learned that you really want to be careful about the grains. People say grains for fiber, but my thing is spinach is fiber too, but it won't spike your sugar, where some of the grains will. Number two, the American Diabetes Society. Again, why was that created? Because we felt that we felt like the recommendations that are in the mainstream don't honor people who struggle. So if you go to a typical hospital, typically when they give you a diabetic plate, it may not really reflect what it should. You may see things like applesauce and a banana, a bagel, orange juice. And this is not like, I don't have to point to any health system. I'm talking about all of them. And it just blows my mind. So I'll have people who come to the hospital on metformin and leave out on insulin. So why would they leave out on insulin? Because the food that they're being fed does not align with what they should be eating. So we have a lot of work to do. And I think that we're moving in the right direction. But my job is to be a voice of reason and to not argue or debate, but to say, let's see what happens to their blood sugar. And if they eat foods that raise their blood sugar, how about they don't eat those foods the next time they eat? And then we go until you eliminate all the foods that raise your blood sugar. So with that, know that you are empowered to change your diet. You just have to know where to start. And that's why those resources were shared.
Outstanding, and thank you. Well, Congressman Mickey Johnson says he wants to be on next week because he has questions about why do certain foods cause mucus. Thank you, Mickey, for sharing. Well, Joe, you're until next Monday.
I'm off mute. Yeah, I'm going to try to be brief, and I will be brief. I want to start by picking up on this idea of the seafood diet and a definition I once heard of the seafood diet. Somebody simply said, "I see food and I eat it." That's not a diet we would advise anybody to go on. So my until next Friday is going to be brief. Pay attention to what you eat, how much you eat, how often you eat, and move more.
Outstanding, outstanding. Well, Doug, you're until next Monday.
Well, Nikki, I just want to say, as a former cheese hater, it's worth the exploration because there's a tremendous amount of really tasty cheeses out there and make a big difference to your quality of life. I just want to give a shout out to Tony because, quite frankly, I can't get enough of him. This wasn't stuff that I heard in medical school. And I started making the changes that he suggested. I've been feeling better. So I believe what Dr. Tony says is true. The last thing I want to say is there's a slogan out there, make America healthy again. Well, let me tell you, it doesn't come from eliminating red food dyes. It has to do with sugar, salt, tobacco, and alcohol. Four very overly commonly produced and sold commodities in our society. If we can change our appetites, we can change and improve our health and save a whole lot of money.
Outstanding, Doug. Thank you so much. Well, I'm actually allergic to cheese. When I eat cheese, my ears swell. I look like Professor Clump. So I don't eat
I'm so sorry to hear that because having become a cheese eater, there's lots of things out there that are tasty and delightful if you can tolerate it.
Yeah, I'm actually allergic. Not I swell shut, tongue swells up. Yeah, I have almost like anaphylaxis type reactions to cheese, dairy, stuff like that. So I don't eat it at all. Maya's until next Monday was she wanted me to have Pearl say that the congressman, this is Pearl, that Pearl said that the congressman is the greatest. That's Maya's until next Monday. So Pearl has shared that the congressman is the greatest. So thank you, Pearl, for sharing that. And Congressman, as always, take us home.
Well, when I stopped to get gasoline this morning, it started my day. And a lady got out of her car to come over and tell me that Bishop Austin had passed away. And she and I then talked about the bishop's churches up in Cabrini, in the Cabrini area, Church of God in Christ up there. But we also talked about a woman, Sister Lula Walker, and her husband. Sister Lula started Tabitha House. Of course, she and her husband have both passed away. But Tabitha House is still going strong. And it's a house for people who are homeless and don't have a place to live. But of course, if people are homeless, eating is also a challenge and is also difficult. So my until next Monday, and I didn't know that we would be as intense. I try and read whatever I can get my hands on. So I got to get that diabetic book. That's my next reader. I don't know if it's the same kind of book that Miss Beatty would have recommended, who kind of taught me how to read. And of course, Miss Beatty was just a great reader, and you could listen to her read for 15, 20 minutes. So I want to thank Dr. Hampton for providing this written information that, is in your leisure time, it's probably a good thing to sit back with a glass of ice water and just read to your heart's content, and then sip a little bit every once in a while. So let me thank all of you for a very engaging evening, a very important, insightful evening. Until next Monday, keep reading.
Outstanding. Outstanding. Well, our colleague Krista Overton is here and she says she remembers them so well. And this is just 100. And Kathy Jones is smiling and laughing. Thank you guys for being here. Good night, everyone. See you next Monday.
All right.